Welcome to the final chapter, Chapter 10, and we are going to be planning for the future. In this chapter, we're going to be learning about retirement planning, IRAs, ways property can be transferred through the legal system, wills, and purpose of living wills, advance directives, power of attorney, and how professionals can help you navigate this journey. So first, let's talk about retirement. There's really two kinds of plans that you're looking at. Most people in the olden days had pension plans, where basically you would work for an extended period of time. When you retired, you would receive X amount of dollars per month for the rest of your life. This was guaranteed by the employer, and this happened all up until the last about 25 years. This was kind of commonplace. What you find is that when people would do this, it actually make a big financial burden on the companies as people started to live longer and as more and more employees were through the program. It started becoming this financial burden. So a lot of these companies switched over to what's called a defined contribution plan. This is where each month or each paycheck you get a defined amount that gets put back for you as an employee into a 401k or similar retirement account. Now the question you'll ask and you'll be asked about a lot: how much do I need to retire? The answer is it depends. It depends on how much you need to live, what your expenses are going to be, how long you expect to live, how much money you made, what you're used to doing, and what you want to do while you're retired. Now, that being said, pretty much an easy, good figure to think about would be somewhere between $500,000 to $1.6 million. That, give or take, is going to be the equivalent of what you might need in order to retire comfortably. Now, that exact amount is going to depend very heavily, again, on all those factors I mentioned, but that's going to be what, if you were getting a ballpark number, my goal is to be at the $1.2, $1.4 million amount when I want to retire. Will that happen? I'm hoping so, but that's going to be the amount that I'm going to be betting on. Some of you may go, okay, what's Social Security? Social Security was implemented in 1937, and it's kind of a government-funded pension plan. So we mentioned that earlier, but this is a little bit different version of a pension plan. Essentially what happens is it's a employee-funded retirement benefit plan. So I work, I pay into Social Security. They pay out to people who are currently retired. What Social Security looks like today will most likely not be what it looks like in 30, 40 years. There's a formula that goes with it, the amount that you make over 35 years gets accounted for, a lot of math. And when it comes down to it, I like to look at the world as if I will save for my own retirement, thinking that Social Security will not be around. If it's around, fantastic. If not, I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over it. We're going to accept it for what it is, and we will move on. So if you want to know how you reach certain income levels and you want to know what your average amount that you have back is, you can look at this chart. It kind of gives you an idea that starting early will make you more money in the long run than starting later. You can see how big of a difference it is if you start at the age 25 compared to you start at the age 45. Okay, so defined contribution plans, already define those. Some employers will match your contribution. So say Ball State. Well, not what they have, but let's use it as an example. Say if I put 5% into my 401 or 403b, they will give 2.5% of free money and match that. Always take the match. You will find other employers that do something called vesting, where you have to work for so many years for a company before you can get access to that money if you leave. So the longer the vesting period, the longer you got to stay at that company. Most companies have a vesting period of 1 to 5 years, depending on the setup. Some have 100% vested right away. It depends on the company and the retirement plans they offer. And you also see that most of these are excluded from current taxable incomes. There's 4 different kinds of defined contribution plans that you're going to see commonly. All 4 of these are based upon what institution or company you work with. They're all the same in essence, but when you look at it, 401ks are for the private sector. 403bs are for public education and nonprofits. 457bs are for state and local government. Thrift savings plans, those are for federal government employees. So if you have this, what you're trying to do with any retirement account is you're trying to basically beat inflation. Inflation is going to range between 2 to 5% in a given year, depending on a lot of different factors that happen in the world and the economy. But your goal is to be 4 or 5 percentage points above that if possible. Most people do this by investing in mutual funds. We've talked about mutual funds in detail in a previous chapter, but what you're essentially doing is you're trying to let it grow, and if you manage it really well, you may be able to retire earlier than expected because you were able to manage it so well. Okay, so we just talked about company retirement accounts. Let's talk about individual retirement accounts. So those company accounts we just mentioned, anything with the 4s or the thrift savings plan, those are employer sponsored. So what that means is an employer has to open up that on behalf of an employee. You and I could go open an IRA up today at any point in time because it's an individual retirement account. It's not attached to an employer. Why would someone want to do this? Well, number one, it's to save for retirement. Everything else, there's valuable tax benefits, provides some asset protection, lets you reach into it. There's some tax credits possibility. And the big one is depending on if you have a traditional or a Roth IRA, they grow, taxes are handled differently. Traditional IRAs grow tax, you put money in and you don't have to pay taxes on the money when you put it in, but you have to pay it when you pull it out. Roth's inverse, you pay taxes on the money you put in, all the earnings and everything are not taxed when you pull that money out at a later date. So let's go through how this works. Basically, anytime you open a retirement account, whether it be through an employer or as an individual, you're basically opening an account at a bank, credit union, fund company, brokerage firm, or through a financial advisor. You select what assets you want to invest in. You put your money towards those. They grow. They grow in 3 different ways: interest, dividends, or capital gains. You also have appreciation, depending on what funds you're in, or if you're using stocks, that's when something goes up in value. And what you do is you keep the money in the account. You don't pay any taxes as long as the money stays in there until you withdraw the money. If you take it out before 59 and a half, you have to pay a 10% penalty on it. If you keep it in past that date or that timeline in your life, you don't have to pay that 10% penalty. Roth IRAs are the inverse. So traditional allows you to put pre-tax contributions. You do it when you pull money out. Roth is when you put it in after you've paid taxes, and then you don't pay taxes later on. I personally tell all my students to get a Roth IRA. We don't know what the taxes will look like in 30 years. Pay taxes now when your income level's low, let the money grow, and don't pay those taxes when you withdraw that money. It's a personal preference. Talk to your financial advisor about it, but that's the one I highly recommend. Okay, so how can I give to an IRA? You got to make money. That's fine. You have limits on how much you can put in. $66,000 this last year. It was $5,500 in 2018. If you make so much money, you may not be able to attribute or contribute to a Roth IRA, and you have to be a little younger. Now, these rules change depending on who the congressional body is, how that they create tax law. This could be different for you in 5 years. I actually think some of this is different from when it was when I started. So just always look into your rules and talk to a financial advisor. Now, there is a process called rollovers. So say you work at a company and you decide to leave that company. Obviously, you probably don't want to keep that retirement account and manage it from one company when you open another one. So what the process is called a rollover. You can actually move that money from one account to another account without having to pay taxes, depending on the way you roll it over. So you can see, here's the different examples. Don't do this on your own. talk to a financial advisor for this. So this is basically reinterpreting that chart we saw earlier. If you want $1 million to retire, start saving 10 to 15% of your income for retirement. I like to use, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, the pay increase method of how to increase your retirement savings. But right away, when you start getting a job, put 10% of your money back into retirement instantly. Ball State, they do it automatically for me. That's their contribution. Boom. Then I put additional money on top of that into my personal Roth IRA and the additional 403b that I opened. I'm trying to get up to that point where I invest a lot now so I don't have to invest a lot later. The earlier you invest, the more time your money has to compound and to grow. You don't have to invest as much if you do it earlier. I cannot stress that enough. Now, some of you will go, well, I need it for this or that. That's fine. If possible, save earlier rather than later. So save early, save at least 10%, automate it, and invest aggressively. You may be more conservative in nature, less risky. When it comes to investments, invest heavily and invest aggressively. So, for instance, right now we're having the coronavirus, COVID-19, VID, whatever it is, and it's causing a lot of swings in the marketplace. I am tossing more money in there right now than I was before. Why? Because I realize that I have 30 to 40 years before I ever need this money. I'm willing to ride the roller coaster up and down because I don't have to worry about it right now. Over time, the stock market has appreciated in value on a rate of 7 to 9%, depending on what time frame you look at. If I needed my money tomorrow, I'd be way more conservative with my investment. Since I need it in 30 to 40 years, I will play the game, I will invest aggressively, and go from there. So we're going to quickly buzz through these. Property ownership and trusts. Basically, when you own something, you have a title to it. These are usually for bigger items such as houses, cars, trailers, boats, anything that's worth a significant amount of value. You don't get a title for a dresser or a TV that you have. The way you title something structures who actually owns it. So it gets confusing, but this is really only ever needed if you go through a death, a divorce, or property splitting of something. Some of this may be of interest if your parents are getting up there in age and you want to title things in your name. This kind of shows you how that is all done. Not in detail, but gives you some terminology. Go seek a legal advice or help from a financial advisor as you look at this. So, fee simple. This is where you, the sole owner of the property. Tenancy in common is when you own the property with another person. Joint tenancy with the right of survivorship. You own the property equally with another person. Tenancy by entirety. You own the property with your spouse. And community property. One half of the assets held as community property belong to each spouse. These are the same things. Way you can transfer property while you're still living, you can sell it or you can give it away. Pretty easy. When you're dead, you go through probate, which is the court-supervised process of distributing assets and paying debts after someone's dead. Some ways you can avoid this probate period is by titling property appropriately and using trust. Titling your assets transfers ownership outside of the probate process, so does naming beneficiary plans. A trust is a legal entity that holds property and assets for someone or some group. So, to think of it this way, if you have assets, you're the grantor. You have those assets and income. You create a trust document. You have a trustee. They watch over that, and then they pay those out to the trust beneficiaries. 4 kinds of trust we talk about. Living, that's why you're still alive. Irrevocable living trust, once established, can't be changed. A revocable one will allow you to do it as long as you're alive. You can change anything, and when you die, nothing can change. And a testamentary trust is established after the death of a grantor through a will and is irrevocable. You may receive an unlimited dollar amount as a gift and an inheritance. Both options are income tax free at a federal level. Now let's talk about wills for a second. They're a part of estate planning. So Pretty much when you die, there's 4 ways something can be transferred from you in terms of ownership. Title, a contract, state law, or a will. The easiest of them is a will. But we will talk quickly about titleship. We did talk about titles. This is where you have somebody as a co-titler or joint tenants. We talked about those just a few minutes ago. That automatically will transfer upon death. Contract, usually this is done as a beneficiary agreement. And what you find is that this is quickly, it's easy, but it's written because it's legally enforceable between 2 or more parties. State law, for those items that are not transferred in the other ways that we have stated, the laws of the state will dictate who gets what. Each state is very different. One state may be completely, it's the significant other. Others may say it's your first and second sibling. They get 50% each. It just depends on the state. That is where a will comes in. So you have a will. It's a legal document that dictates your desires regarding the distribution of your property after death. It's a gift. You have a gift and a bequest. This is how you give somebody something in a will. So, what do you have to have a will? Someone's got to be of the age of 18. There are some exceptions if you're married or your young parents. You've got to be of sound mind. You've got to list specifically what you want to be transferred, and it must be specific on whom you want it transferred to. It needs to be written. Don't do handwritten oral. Just get it word processed. It must be signed. It needs to be signed by 2 or witnessed by 2 adults. They need to be competent and not the beneficiaries of the will. Will must be signed in front of a witness, and the drafter of the will cannot be forced to sign the will. In there, you're going to have an executor or a personal representative. It is this person's thing or job to carry out the will's directions and disposing of the deceased property. Probate's the public process ensuring the distribution, but the executor will help go through the probate process to validate the will. Who needs a will? If you have assets you want to transfer to another person, or if you have valuable assets, if you're married, but you should still have a will if you're married, because sometimes states will transfer it over, but you just want to be sure. If you want to help reduce the financial confusion, and if you're single and you want your parent assets to go to your parents, probably not for you, but if you want it to go to some other organization or entity, you would need to have a will in place for that. So there's a list of about 6 different items here that I would recommend that you need to think about when a will is needed. When you're married or birth of a child, divorce or separation, death of a spouse, receipt of insurance, or a change in financial circumstances. Say you found gold or won the lottery. These would be when you would need to update that will. A few other little things we're going to touch on briefly here: living wills and power of attorney. Living will is a legal document that tells you how you want to be treated medically if you become incapacitated. Simply, it states if you would like life-saving procedures to be performed or not. Without one, the treatment's made by courts. Sometimes family members have a little bit of influence, but not a ton. If you want your wishes to be worked or used, please fill out a living will. Courts will always pretty much side on the side of life-sustaining treatment indefinitely, unless you have a living will that directs otherwise. Healthcare proxy. This is much like your parent proxy. If you're here at campus, you give somebody healthcare proxy. They can make decisions and explain your medical wishes, but you have to have this done before you're in an accident. So it's like my wife and I have these written up. It's in a safe. If I was in an incident, she would know to go grab those. She could take it, and she would have healthcare proxy over all of my stuff. Power of attorney. It's a legal document allowing a person, often called an agent, to act on your behalf. There's a bunch of different types of power of attorney. You'll use these a lot more than you think you will. You have healthcare. It's used for medical reasons. When it's done, when you die, you don't have power of attorney over healthcare anymore. Limited. This tends to be given to, say, like your financial advisor. They have a limited power of attorney to help you make certain purchases on your behalf. General is broad powers, durable, has specific powers, and springing only happens when you have a predetermined event occurs. These are some examples of power of attorneys being used. Someone to talk about your IRS to the financial or tax situation, an attorney, accountant using that information, financial advisor managing your portfolio, helping a relative who's temporarily incapacitated or injured. We've already talked about checking accounts, so they have a copied slide here. But there's financial professionals. There's differences between all of these. So you have financial planner. It's like your financial quarterback. Counselor is going to help you get past your past problems. An advisor tends to be product focused. Tax advisor is going to be tax and IRS questions. And a legal advisor provides legal advice and counsel. There's different certifications that you may want to look at for all of these to make sure the people you're using are professionals and know what they're doing. You kind of see a little bit of a financial counselor, there's a planner. Please note that some are paid by commission, some are paid by fees, some get a little bit of both. Understanding exactly how your financial professional is being paid will help you have a better understanding of what choices they're asking you to do and if they're in your own best interest. We've talked about fiduciary and sustainability, but there are other conflicts of interest. Mind your own money and always make your own decisions, but use advice to be helped. I think that is it. Thank you for going through all the classes, and that is the end of Chapter 10.